everybody. So in this video, we are going to be talking about MLA citation. So as you've seen in some of the previous, if you've gone through all the MLA and the APA resources that are in that very first module at the top of when you click modules in your Canvas, there's lots of digital resources there, but I wanted to have a video for you so I could go through and just kind of explain some of those sources and hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any over this citation form. There's also an APA video that is in this week's module as well. That APA video was recorded last year, so it's a little old, but APA hasn't changed at all. So all the core information is still the same within there. So remember, you're going to choose between APA and MLA this semester, and you're going to choose it based on the career path or the major that you're going into later in life. Okay, whether you're starting it now with CCP or whether you're sort of on the fence and you're not sure, we want to choose one or the other. If you're unsure of which one to choose, honestly, I'm going to direct you towards APA because most majors go that way. But MLA is often used in some as well, so we want to make sure you have the option of doing whichever one that you're going to have to use the most once you get into your core courses, once you're getting more into your major courses, things like that. So click. There it goes. So MLA overall, it stands for the Modern Language Association. So to sum that up very quickly, MLA is going to be used for any of the majors or the careers that deal with the humanities. So if you're an English major like I was, you have to use MLA. Okay. Education majors, which I also was, those are science majors. So I had to use APA. So when I was in my bachelor's and I was in an English program and I was in an education program, so in English, humanities, education, science, I had to switch between MLA and APA all the time. If you're going anywhere in the medical field, that's science, so APA. If you're going to become more of like a social studies or communications major, something like that, MLA, you're going to go that direction. Theater, I was a theater major for a hot second. I have a minor in it. So I'd use MLA when it came to theater pieces. If you're ever confused about where you think you might fall, just feel free to shoot me an email and ask me, and I'll direct you where you got to go. But MLA is anything within like the humanities that you're going to use that citation for. Okay. So we're going to go over document format, in-text citations, and your works cited list. MLA and APA are pretty dang similar, if we're being honest. The biggest difference that gets kind of confusing, in MLA, we call it the works cited. That's that very last page where you list all the sources, the research that you used within the paper. In APA, we call it the bibliography. It's the same thing. We just call it something different. Okay. But a lot of you'll notice as you're looking over all the sources, a lot of the basic format is pretty the same, but there are some minute differences that you need to make sure you're making those changes based on which one you're choosing. So we're going to go over the 9th edition. MLA 8 recently changed. A lot of your high school teachers, I know when I was teaching high school the past few years, I was using MLA 8 because it was the easiest, but there's a couple minor changes in MLA 9, so we're going to make sure we go over those changes and you know what's required of you within there. The basic changes, they just made it a bit clearer what the traits were when you're making your citations and what they mean. So we're going to go a bit more in depth on how to create your works cited citations so you understand exactly how to do them on your own. Like I said, we're going to go over all of that stuff. Also, if you want to follow along with your notes on this in the module for this week, I have a file of the slides. So if you wanted to have the slides next to you while I'm going over it, if you wanted to print it on your own and take notes, you absolutely can. I do highly suggest that you make a cheat sheet. So I always had an MLA cheat sheet and an APA cheat sheet next to me whenever I was writing papers. So I would have the big things that you know you're going to have to do in every single paper, how you're setting it up. I know I'm always going to have a database journal in every paper. I know I was going to have a book in every paper. So I would have an example citation, in-text citation. I would have all of that on a cheat sheet that I could really quickly glance to as I was writing my essays. So if I was you, I would be making my cheat sheet while you're watching this video and going through all the different resources that are on Canvas and in that module for you before you take the quiz. And then keep that cheat sheet so every time you're working, you got it. Okay. So basic rules, always follow your instructor's guidelines. You're going to have some professors who are saying, yeah, I want MLA, but I want it in 14 size font, not 12 font, because my eyes hurt and I'm getting old, so I need it bigger. Ask your professor if you're not sure. Ask your instructor if you're not sure. I'm going to give strict, I want MLA, I want APA. You're following the strict rules of what those two are in this course. But every class you take in college, this is your associate's, bachelor's, even your master's degree. Ask your professor if they have any preferences if they don't outline it in the syllabus. Most of the time, they'll outline it in the syllabus for you, but always make sure you're talking to your professors and asking. Basics of MLA. 8.5 by 11 just means computer paper. Like, you're not turning in construction paper. You're not doing it in horizontal portrait mode, blah, blah, blah. You're doing the basic doc setup. You're going to double space everything. If you are on Word, Control 2 is a shortcut you can hit to make sure everything is double spaced. If you're on a Google Doc, I'm pretty sure it's Control Shift 2 to make everything double spaced, or you can just click the button, but I'm all about those shortcuts when I type. You want it in 12-point Times New Roman or similar font. This is where a lot of professors have a preference. I am very strict. I want 12-point Times New Roman, nothing else. Okay. This ensures that you're meeting the requirements in comparison, and we can see how you're developing throughout that. But ask your professor if they have anything particular difference with that. Only one space after punctuation. I think all of you do this naturally. This is something that for all of us old people like me, when we were taught typing, we used to hit space after a period. They don't teach you that anymore. So just double check. If you do tend to do this, I do it a lot. You can hit Control H on a Google Doc or a Word doc, and it's going to find everything and then replace it. So you could put Control H, period, space, replace it with period, space. And so it's an easy fix that you don't have to go through your entire paper and find them all. Instead, you just replace them all. This is also really good if you know that you've misspelled a word a lot on accident and you don't want to have to go through your whole paper and find it. Control H, find it, replace it. Super easy. All your margins should be at 1 inch. Just don't touch your margins. Microsoft and Google Docs naturally set everything to 1 inch. Don't touch your margins. Okay, it's where we want it. And I know all the tips and tricks to finding out if you have adjusted your margins to make sure you can get the page length. Just get to the page length. Don't try and mess with it. And you've got to indent the first line of every paragraph. You've always done that. You hit the tab button every time you start a new paragraph. Your computer, your document, once you get in the groove of typing, will naturally start to tab for you most of the time. But you're indenting the first line. Do not just hit space, or space, or whatever it is. Hitting tab is a finite amount of spaces, and it ensures that you have this very even line down your paper. So just hit tab. Don't just hit space a bunch. MLA style paper should also have a header with page numbers. So at the very top of your paper, on every single page, it's going to have your last name and the page number. Okay. On Google Docs and on Microsoft Word, whether you're using the downloaded version of Microsoft Word or you're using the free version that you get on your emails, and I'm going to show you how to find it in your emails in a different video, you're going to go to insert page number first. If you go to insert header, it kind of messes everything up somehow. So go to insert page number, and then you just type your last name in front of the page number that it naturally comes up. If you're on the free version of Microsoft Word, you hit insert page number, it gives you like a weird pound sign or hashtag. That means that your number, your page number is there. You don't need to type anything in it. You type your last name in front of or to the left of that pound hashtag sign. Okay. So you're just doing that, and then it goes on every single page and in succession, page 1, page 2, it'll naturally change that. For container, so when you're citing a book or an article or a website or whatever it is, if it's a big thing, like it's a book, then you're going to use italics. Or if you're citing an entire website, italics, it's a big thing. If it's a tiny thing, like a chapter in a book, or a poem, or a short story, or a single page on a website, not the entire page, you're going to put quotes around it. So the easiest way to remember this, if you're citing something and it's big, it leans to the side because it's big, so you got to italicize it. If it's tiny, it needs support, and you got to put quotes around it. Okay, and then you would place any endnotes on a separate page. I'm not doing endnotes. Endnotes are much more common when you're doing like scientific research, science projects, science fair projects a lot. You're adding additional notes explaining how you've done that research. Typically is what an endnote is. That is not going to be common in very many of your papers. Your professors will tell you if you need these, or just ask, say, hey, are you wanting endnotes? If they want endnotes, They go on the page before the works cited. Okay. But we're not going to require those in this class because none of the papers we write are going to necessitate any endnotes. The first page of your MLA paper just starts first page of paper. You do not have a title page. So if you're writing an APA, the very first page is a title page. That title page does not count towards your page length. Okay. But an MLA, you don't have that title page. You just start out with your basic info up top. I'm going to show you a picture of it here in a second. Basic info up top, and then you start writing the paper. Okay. If for some reason you were to write a paper in a group project, then you need a title page so you can list out all those group names. All right. Everything is double spaced. The information that you put in the very top, I gotta think because the camera's swapping me, so I think it would be the top left-hand side. It look like this for you guys. I don't know. Left-hand side, I think. So top left-hand side is your name, your instructor's name. So Mrs. Megan Looney, whatever you're gonna put. The course, this is English or ENG 1000, or if you're watching this video for an ENG 1100 class for me, you're putting the course name and number. So it's an abbreviation like ENG and then the number 1000 and the date. Put the date it's due. Okay. A couple of reasons why. If you're putting the date that you started it, you're also kind of red flagging telling me if you waited till the day before it was due to start it, because then you just put that date. Also, this helps us see, especially in this course, we're going to do outlines and rough drafts and then final drafts. So I want the final draft due date that you're listing here. I don't want to know the rough draft and the outline date. So you're putting the publication or the submission date on there, upper left-hand corner. After you type all that, then you're going to hit enter again, and then you're going to center your title. If you're on Microsoft, Control E will center everything for you. I'm not sure if Google Docs has a shortcut like that. But hitting Control E centers everything for you. And then after you've typed your title, you hit enter again, and then you bring everything back to the left-hand side. And on Microsoft Docs, your shortcut is Control L, brings everything to the left, and then you start your first paragraph. You're going to start your intro. Okay? So this is generally what it looks like. So top left-hand side, we got our name, professor. If your professor is a doctor or prefers to be called professor, make sure you use their name preference. Just like you ask us to use your name preferences, I want to know your name preferences. If your professor has a doctorate or something, make sure you're putting that in there. I don't. You can just put Megan Looney or Mrs. Looney. It's whatevsies. Just spell it right. Okay. And then you're going to put your class, ENG 1000, and then the date. For MLA and APA both, you need to put the date in common order. So that would be day, month, year. So in succession of getting bigger within there. So day, month, year going up. And then your title is centered. And then after that, or underneath it, we've got our very intro. And as you can see up here where it says Lucas 1, they've got that header where they've got their last name and then the page number, very first page number. Okay. So this is a good, if it was me, I would put this picture on my cheat sheet because this is something you can look back to. Another thing I always do is I have a basic MLA and APA document in my Google Drive. I've got it on my desktop. So anytime I start a new paper, I've got all this basic formatting information done, and I can just make a copy of that document every time I need to start something new, and you don't have to do it over and over again. Okay. Section headers are optional for most. It's if your professor wants or your instructor wants section headers, you're going to need to use section headers. This is typically an APA sciencey thing. Okay, science fair projects, research papers, any of those require section headers because you got to section out your paper. You got to say, hey, here's where I'm going to explain what we're researching. Here's where I'm going to explain what kind of test we did to figure it out. Here's where I'm going to explain the results of that test. So you break up the paper with section headers. This is not common at all for MLA because in MLA, instead of having lots of multi-sections, we're transitioning all into one bigger piece within humanities style papers within there. So in an MLA paper, I'm not requiring section headers. Okay, if you're doing APA, then yes, you need section headers, but not for MLA. This is just an example of how you would set them up. So if you've got your first section header, the first section is over soil conservation, but within that section, you've also got erosion and terracing. Then you have to change how they are typed. So first level is always going to be flush to the left with no bold or underlined. And then level 2, level 3, level 4 gets changed as you go many sections within the bigger section. Again, if you're choosing to do MLA, we're not doing these. APA requires them though. In-text citation. These are super important. We want to make sure your papers are not plagiarized, whether it's accidental or purposeful. Don't plagiarize on purpose. Do not cheat. Accidental plagiarism is also a big no-no though. Okay, and this is why we're going to practice this as much as possible. We're giving you all these sources so you don't have the potential of accidentally plagiarizing. If you don't have in-text citations after any of your quotes, paraphrases, or summaries that you've gained from an outside source, that you found from a website, a book, a journal article, a video, whatever it was you got information from to help you make this argument or to make this summary, whatever it was, you have to say, hey, I found it here. Yes, I have some of my own ideas, but this idea I got from here. That's your in-text citation that you have to have at the end of that sentence, whatever you've set up there. If you don't have it, it's plagiarized. You've taken somebody else's information, you've taken their idea, their work, and you've used it and said, I'm not giving you credit. So you have to give credit to whomever, wherever, whatever has gotten that information from. Okay. Typically, it's going to be the author's last name in parentheses and the page number. Okay. So if there are going to be some cases where you have an abbreviated title, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but typically for all sources, at the end of your sentence, so you've typed your quote, blah, 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 big fancy idea, end quote, parentheses, author last name, page number, parentheses, period. Your period doesn't go until the parentheses is done. So think you've got, here's the information, in-text citation, period. You don't end the sentence until you've given the citation, right? So here's an example. In this very first sentence, they've said the author's last name in the sentence. So Wordsworth is our author. If you say the author's name in the sentence, you don't need to repeat it in the in-text citation. You just need the page number. So Wordsworth stated, blah, 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 things about poetry. We ended my quote, parentheses, page numbers, parentheses, period. I already said his name. I don't need to say it again. But in our second sentence, I didn't say his name in the sentence. So romantic poetry is characterized by blah, 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 quote. Okay, I just gave the quote, but I didn't say who. Since I didn't say who in the sentence, we're going to end our quote, parentheses, author's last name, page number, parentheses, period. Here is where sort of a big difference between MLA and APA. Give me a second. Okay. In MLA, notice there is no comma here. We are not putting PG for page, okay, because the only number that's ever going to go in this parentheses is the page number. APA is different because they're also going to require the year it was published. So APA is going to have commas and a PG in there to designate what the page number is. MLA don't care, okay? Because think in MLA, in those humanities majors like English, we're talking about things that are, I might be talking about Shakespeare that's hundreds of years old. I might want to talk about Beowulf and that original piece of literature that's thousands of years old. So who cares about the year and how up to date it is? Because I'm talking about stuff that's hundreds of years old. So I don't need to put the year here. APA is science-based. We have to care about the year because we have to be as up to date as possible on our scientific research. So that's why they include the year in APA in-text citations and not in MLA. Okay. So, reminder, in-text citations have to have them or they're plagiarized. You're going to put the author's last name and the page number within the parentheses, but if you use the author's last name in the sentence, we're not repeating it. Okay. For print sources, here's just another example. Here's what the works cited citation would look like. So here's where you're showing me at the end of your paper, hey, this is a source I used in case you want to look it. In case you want to check it out. And I will check out your sources because I want to make sure that you're using good, reliable sources that you have evaluated for credibility and that you're actually using them well. Okay. So here's your works cited where you're saying, hey, here's my source. But the main reason you include that is think if you're doing research and somebody else goes, oh, this research is phenomenal, they're a genius, I want to expand on it. They want to be able to go and look at your sources so they can include more. Okay. Um, so this is the source, it has all of here. Since it says all of this and doesn't give us a DOI or a website, I know it's a print source and it's going to need to have a page number. Okay. So just another example to look at. If you don't know the author, okay, one, if your source doesn't have an author listed, I'm going to question its credibility because a credible source should let you know who came up with the idea or at least what group. Say an example, a lot of the time, if you're researching on a hospital's website, they might have had 20 people doing research. So they're not going to tell you the individual name of who did the research, but they'll tell you the department. So if I'm on the University of Toledo Hospital's website, and they're going to tell me that the pediatric department came up with this particular article I'm reading. So my author would be the pediatric department, and then go from there. Um, so double check your sources if they don't have authors. But there are some cases where the source is still credible and usable without an author. If your source has no author, instead of the author going in your in-text citation, you're going to put the first 3 to 5 words of the title. And you have to put that title in quotes or italics because we always do that with titles. Remember, if it's a big title, we italicize it. If it's a tiny title, we support it. So this one was obviously a tiny title. It was an article or a chapter or something. And so we've ended our quote, environmental change, dot, dot, dot. And then parentheses, quote, here's my title, impact of global warming, quote, and then the page number, okay, and then in parentheses. So you're going to replace it with the title. The reason you do this, your works cited, very last page, you have all these long sentences of information about your sources. The very first thing listed in all of those sources is what you put in your in-text citation. So when I'm going through your sources and making sure you cited them correctly, I should be able to scroll down your works cited of all those first words and connect them with your in-text citations. So the big works cited citation for this would start impact of global warming. So they should match and correspond. Okay. So again, the corresponding works cited, these are the first couple words. I know they match. I'm going to come together. Okay. If an author has the same last name, this is common in a lot of topics. So when I did my portfolio dissertation, there was a lot of authors that had the same last names and were related because they were all doing kind of similar topics. If you have this happen where you've got a couple different sources that you've done for research and they have the same last name but different first names, you have to put their first initial. Okay, that's just to designate where in your works cited I'm going to look. Are you looking at A. Miller's piece or R. Miller's piece? So if you have two sources, authors have the same last name, designate who you're talking about with their first initial. But you're only going to do this if this happens. Okay. If you have multiple authors, but with different pieces. So if you're doing a research on Stephen King, okay, and you want to analyze the impact of Stephen King on horror films, or in horror literature or whatever, Stephen King is going to get repeated a lot. Okay. Oh, I'm talking about the wrong thing. I'm going to go to this one. I'll come back to that because I was explaining the wrong one. So Stephen King, you have a lot of different. So you're going to talk about Carrie and The Shining and I can't think of it, Strawberry Spring. You're going to talk about 3 of his stories there. So you have 3 different pieces by him that you all list in your works cited. So you'll have a Stephen King piece, Stephen King piece, Stephen King piece. All 3 of those works cited are going to start King, Stephen, King, Stephen, King, Stephen. They're all going to start the same. So when I'm looking at your paper, how am I going to know which one you're talking about? If that happens, you need to put which piece you're talking about in your in-text citation. So in this example, I didn't explain the author or what piece I was talking about. Go back. Or what piece I was talking about in the sentence. So my in-text citation has to go parentheses, author's last name, always first because that's the first thing in my works cited, author's last name, comma, the first couple words of whatever source you're referencing. So if in this sentence I was referencing Pet Cemetery, I'm going to go King, comma, Pet Cemetery, and then the page number if there's a page number. Okay. So you just have to do this so when I'm looking up which King source, so I know which King source I'm looking at when I'm at your works cited. In this one, note, they're going to use the author's name in the sentence. So since you use the author's name in the sentence, I don't need to repeat it in the in-text citation, but I do need to tell you which source I'm using. So if in the sentence I say Stephen King wrote two amazing pieces, The Shining and Pet Cemetery, and I give some quotes, the one quote associated with Pet Cemetery has to have Pet Cemetery in the in-text citation. The one with The Shining has to have The Shining in the in-text citation. So you have to designate which piece you're talking about. Okay, go back to the one I didn't explain right. Okay, works by multiple authors. So if you have a piece, and this is super common, I guarantee you're going to have at least one source that does this. This one, not guaranteed. This one, not guaranteed. I guarantee this one's going to happen at least once while you're doing your research. So if you have two or more people working on a paper together, and this is super common, okay, where they've done research together, you have to give credit to everybody who wrote that paper. If you have two people that wrote that paper, you have to list them both. So in this bottom example, Strong and Ellis came together and they did a study in 2016. So I have to say both Strong and Ellis. So Strong and Ellis, and make sure you spell out and. Don't use the ampersand, which is just the and symbol. So when you hit Shift 7, okay, that's an ampersand, it's the and symbol. But I want you to spell it out in MLA. APA is different. They want you to use the ampersand. In MLA, we're going to spell it out, okay, because we like words in MLA, so we're going to spell things out. So you have to give both people credit, and then, of course, the page number. If you have three or more people, okay, then it's a little much. We're not going to list them all. It's going to take too much time. So if you have three or more people, you're going to list the very first person listed. Don't just randomly choose. Whoever's listed first on that source, you're going to put them first. So Smith was listed first. And then instead of listing Ellis and Bob and Joe and Billy and whomever else helped with the paper, you're going to put et al. Et al is just and others in Latin. So you're just saying Smith and some other people wrote this piece. Okay. So if you have two authors, list them both. If you have three or more, et al. Just combine them. Honestly, the reason you do the very first person listed too, a lot of the time in group effort papers, whoever did the most work or whoever was in charge of the work is listed first. And that's why they're listed first going through. So this one, so if you're thinking about cheat sheets, this is going on your cheat sheet because you're definitely going to do this at least once. Multi-volume works in the Bible, not as common. Multi-volume works, this is common in anthologies. So if you are an English major, later on down the road, this is going to happen. Sometimes, too, you might have a textbook that has multi-volumes within that textbook. I had quite a few where it was English literature, but you have this volume of English and this volume of English. And then there's that. So you have to say which volume it is. So you're just getting more detailed in your in-text citation and saying which one it's coming from. With Bible, there's so many versions of the Bible. It has a bit of a different citation. Here's what I always tell all my students with this one. If you come upon this, let me know, because then I will walk you through it one-on-one and we'll figure it out. But this is so very not common, especially for first year writing or even in your bachelor's program. For your master's, maybe you might encounter this a few more times. But for your bachelor's, it's rare that you're going to have to use a citation like this. So if you come upon this, just let me know. Citing an indirect source. This is going in your cheat sheet because I know it's going to happen. Okay, put it on your cheat sheet. An indirect source. This means you're reading an article, and let's pretend I'm writing an article. And in my article, I'm going to say that according to Stephen King, people love horror, and I'm going to quote something from Stephen King. I didn't come up with that, but you found it in my article. So in your sentence, you're going to say, according to Looney, people love horror. But your in-text citation is going to say, I swapped that. I had a brain fart. My bad. So in your sentence, you're going to say, according to Stephen King, because he came up with it. It's his idea, not mine. Okay? Let's do this example again. I'm so sorry. I write an article. I say, according to Stephen King, people love horror. Okay? In your sentence, you're going to say, according to Stephen King. He came up with the idea, not me. You just found it through me. Okay. So according to Stephen King, in your in-text citation, it has to match your works cited. Your in-text citation always has to match your works cited so I can figure out where you got your info. So you're going to add the QTD. All that means is that quoted in Looney. I found it in Looney's article from here. Okay. So sentence has to say where you found it. Who actually said it? Stephen King actually said it. Looney had no idea. She was dumb. She didn't know. But Looney is the one who said it, and Looney's where I found it, quoted in Looney. So this example is just Ravitch. Ravitch came up with the idea. He's the one that's a genius. But Weissman published it. Weissman typed it out, and they found it in Weissman. So quoted in this. Okay. You are absolutely going to do this one. In almost every journal article and in a lot of websites, this happens all the time. They have their own in-text citations, so you still have to give credit where credit is actually due. Okay. Multiple citations. This might happen if you're quoting from a couple different pages in one sentence and you've kind of taken this idea from page 2 and this idea from page 400 and you wanted to smush it into one. Okay. You have to tell me where they happened so I can go, oh, this was not on page 1. So I can know where to look to find them. So if you have multiple page numbers, you went from 1 and you stole from 400. Okay, not stole, you grabbed an idea. Then you're going to put author's last name still, page 2, comma, 400. So I know I'm looking at 2 pages. So again, the same example, Zender, one author, but hey, I got it from 2 different pages. Okay, so next one. Okay, I'm getting choked. So time-based media. You absolutely can use time-based media. This would be a documentary. Documentaries are amazing if they're credible. Okay. You might be using a YouTube video. I've had plenty of papers where people analyze TikToks. There are a lot of really good TikToks out there that help sort of spur on, especially if you want to analyze the impact of social media. Anything like that that is time-based, YouTube videos included. Instead of the page number, you have to put the time. Okay, so a wee bit annoying, but at least you can pause and write down the time. So if you are giving a direct quote or a paraphrase from a time-based media, you pause that bad boy and you write down the time to make sure you have it there. So you're still giving whatever is listed first. So this is a TV show. So we're not listing the author first because created by, he's a publisher. He's going there. So TV episodes are a little different. The first thing we're going to give here is the title of the episode. That's listed first in the works cited. Since that was listed first in the works cited, wham bam, that's what's listed in my in-text citation. And then I'm giving the time. So hey, if you want to go watch this episode of Buffy, you go to 3 minutes 16 seconds. This is where they say it. Okay, so you have to know what time it happened. This one's also going to be very common. I want it in your cheat sheets. If a source doesn't have page numbers, this is for any website. I'm not going to say all digital sources because you may be doing research from the Marion Tech Library and you find a resource that's a journal article there and you're reading it online, but it has page numbers. So make sure you're looking really closely to see if your source has page numbers or not. But websites do not have page numbers. Okay. So if it does not have page numbers, you just don't do it. You don't include anything extra fancy. You just drop it. Okay. You still have to have the author's last name in your in-text citation, but there's no page number. So I don't even know. Okay. I have heard of some instructors, I don't know about Marion Tech, but I've met some instructors that want you to put paragraph number. So if you're reading off of a website, and you're like 4th paragraph down and that's the quote you're taking, some instructors may say, hey, I want the paragraph number in your in-text citation if there's no page numbers. I don't. Okay, Control F exists for a reason. If I want to find your quote on the page, I can. It's super easy. So I don't need the page number. You just go and drop it. But always, again, we're going to go back to that first slide. Make sure you're asking your instructors their preferences. Short prose quotations. This is just some examples to show you how you can include quotes. Okay, different ways to do your in-text citations. Notice this first example. The author says, according to some, dreams express, quote, profound aspects of personality, quote, though others disagree. So their sentence continued after their quote. Since their sentence continued, this last half of the sentence, well, that doesn't need an in-text citation. That was my thought. I said that part. I just want to give the in-text citation for the quote. So they had the in-text citation follow the quote. Okay. And then continued their sentence. So if you wanted to do something like this, you can. But I'm going to tell you, if you put the in-text citation at the end as well, that's still correct. Okay. That is a writer's preference where that goes. If your quote ends at the end, it's always going to go at the end, period. But if it's sort of in the middle of your sentence like this one, this way and this way are both correct. Writer's preference. Okay. Again, another example here. We've put our author's last name in the sentence. I'm going to drop his name in the in-text citation because I've already said it once. I'm not repeating myself. Okay. And then, go back. There we go. In this one, we have a question mark. Question marks can act as periods as well. So we didn't say our author's last name in the sentence. We have to put it in our in-text citation. Okay. So just a couple more examples if you wanted to put examples in your cheat sheet. If you have more than 4 lines of prose just means text. Okay. So if you were including oh, my bad. Stop. There we go. My bad. If you're including kind of a lengthy couple sentences, if it has more than 3 lines, not just like 3 sentences, but like 1, 2, 3 lines, okay, then you have to do a block quote. So you've blocked it over, or for you guys, it's this direction. Okay. So all that means is you're saying, hey, this is kind of lengthy and it's not mine. It's a lengthy quote that I have to take away. My first rule of thumb with this is you should not have these often, especially if it's a short paper. If you're writing a 2-3 page paper, do not have a block quote, because that's only 2 to 3 pages for you to illustrate your knowledge on the topic, your verbiage, your writing. You don't have time to include a block quote and truly show your instructor what you're trying to say. Lengthier papers can sometimes dictate it, so you might need to include one. But you shouldn't have tons, because I'm going to remind you, your name is at the top of that paper. Your name. So you're telling me that you wrote it. The majority of this paper is your writing, your ideas. My rule of thumb is always 80-20. 80% of the text in a paper should be your writing, your verbiage. No more than 20% should be quotes, paraphrases, or summaries. No more than 20. Because it's just support for your ideas. This is your idea, your argument, your analysis. 20% to support your ideas. And a block quote is a lot of somebody else's ideas. So you want to make sure you don't really have them if you don't need them. So I'm going to err on the side that I want you to avoid them, because it can kind of look like lazy writing if you include them too much or if you include them in short papers. But I also don't want to say you should never use them, because sometimes they're necessary. I've used them in writing before. But what you're doing with it, you're typing your paragraph, you're going, and now you're ready to include that quote. So notice they've introduced their quote here, and they ended it with a colon, ... Okay. So they're getting ready to say, Nellie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him through her narration, ... So now narration's coming up. You're going to show me that narration, ... You hit enter. Okay. Type away that whole quote. Don't do any formatting until you've typed the whole thing. So you've typed it, you go, ooh, that's over 3 lines. So now I got to block it. So you've typed it, you've done your in-text citation, and since it's a block quote and we're shushing it over, we actually don't include quotation marks, because the act of you tabbing it over is going to say, hey, it's a quote. Okay. And a kind of weird rule that I really don't know the explanation for, your period goes at the end of the quote now, not at the end of the citation. I have no explanation for this. That's the rule, and we follow it. But that's what we do for block quotes. It goes like this. So you've typed the quote, you've typed the in-text citation, you put your period in the weird spot because it's a block quote. You've typed it, you hit enter again, and then you finish off the paragraph. Okay? You finish the paragraph. Now, we got to go back and format our block quote. So to get our block quote tabbed over after we've typed it, you're going to highlight that quote and hit the tab button. It tabs the whole thing over. There's a few other ways people have tried it, and it kind of messes up the format in a weird way, I think that's the easiest way to do it, is to do all your typing first and then highlight, tab over. It, excuse me, it doesn't really mess anything up that way when you do it in that order, okay? But again, I would like you to avoid them if at all possible, okay? 1 to 3 lines of poetry. If you are including poetry, if you're doing like 1 to 2 lines, just type it like a normal sentence with their punctuation. If you're doing, or I'm sorry, opposite ways. If you're doing more than 3 lines of poetry, then we're going to block quote it and you're going to type it like the poem looks. So in The Raven, where they've got the stanzas, you're going to make it look like the stanzas in that poem. If you're only doing a couple lines, and this is typical, where you're only going to do a couple lines of the poetry, hey, just these little lines, are going to support my idea, then you're going to use the slash mark, the backslash, to show, or this direction. You're going to use the backslash to show, hey, they hit enter, and it was a new line in the poem. So while I pondered weak and weary, backslash, I forgot the next line of the poem, backslash, and so on and so forth. I'll remember it at the end of the video. I'm going to remember it. And of course, now instead of page numbers with a poem, you're going to put the lines. So lines 31 through 32, whatever lines it was that you're quoting. So there's not really a page number for your poem. It's more of your lines. Again, block quote, you use it 3 or more when you have poem. If the poem is in an unusual way formatted, try to reproduce it as best you can. So there are a lot of poems where like you might have the text here and then the stanza moves here and the stanza moves here and then it's here and here and here. And so the words move all over the page. Try to mimic it as best you can in your formatting, but don't make yourself mad trying to get there. Just do best possible. It's okay if it's not quite right. Just in the best way to mimic what they've done. Okay. This is in your cheat sheet. Okay, poetry. I'm not sure if you're going to use poetry in your papers. That's kind of writer's preference and your preference and what you're going to write about. Kind of rare. This one you're doing both of these. So if you were adding words into a quote, so this happens a lot when you have to define a word that might be kind of weird, or maybe you need to add a word that the author didn't include, but you need it to make your reader understand what you're trying to say. You have the quote that you've typed. And if you're wanting to add something new that the author did not say, you're going to use brackets. So I'll look on my computer where they are. They're next to the letter P. Okay. So you have those brackets. So you can put bracket, added word, bracket, and then finish your quote. Okay. So this also happens if you've got this sentence here that you want to use at page 1 and this sentence here on page 4 that you want to use and you want to combine them. Ooh, you got to add the word and for those 2 sentences to make sense. You're going to use the brackets, include the word and. Okay. So for omitting words, similar situation. Maybe I've got this quote on page 1, this quote on page 4. I want to put them together. I don't need to add a word. I just got to show that I took out all of page 3, 2, 3, and pages 2 and 3 to get you these words. So if you're taking things out of a quote, you're going to put the ellipsis, which is ... Okay. And if you want that formatting, you do not need to hit period, space, period, space, period, space. Don't do that. It's going to mess it up. Just type your word, space, ... space, finish typing. And then Google Doc or Microsoft Doc will make it look pretty. Okay. So if there's a word that just doesn't make sense or a phrase that doesn't make sense for your particular paper, you're like, they're talking about a different subject. It doesn't apply to me. Take it out, ... But most commonly, you're trying to get these 2 sentences that are in 2 different areas to click together. So you've got to show I took out all these different pages or paragraphs of text, ... finish the sentence. Okay. And you're still putting the page number. So if you did pages 1 through 4 or 1 and 4 and you combined it, you've got to put 1, 4 or 1 through 4 in that in-text citation to show me that. This should definitely be on your cheat sheet. So everything we talked about previously, those are in-text citations. That's what you're including in the sentences, in the paragraphs. So as I'm reading your essay, I'm like, they got this from there. So this is where you're showing me where you got your quotes, your paraphrases, and your summaries from. Because quotes, paraphrases, and summaries, all 3, we'll go over that a little later in the semester, All three need cited because all three, you're getting the info from other people. Okay, so those go with your in-text citations. This page is your works cited. So you're saying, hey, now you can find my sources. So this little kind of fill in the blank card is how you create your works cited entry. You absolutely can use EasyBib and those generators. I will tell you, EasyBib's not my favesies. It makes a lot of mistakes. I can tell when you're using EasyBib because it's common mistakes. I suggest on the homepage of Canvas, I gave you the Purdue OWL, APA, and MLA links so you can quickly get to them. Go to those links. Purdue OWL has their own citation generator. It has a bunch of advertisements, which is annoying, but it's free. It's free, so we deal with it. Um, but any citation generator, it's a computer program. It's gonna make mistakes. There are certain things that it's just not gonna be able to do. One of the most common ones when you're using a website and you're trying to get it cited, you put it into your citation generator, but it didn't fill in the author. It didn't fill in the container. It didn't fill in the publisher. What? It must not exist. It does. Okay. You've got to find it on the website. You've got to find the author, the container, the publisher. What happens when somebody's creating a website, they're doing all this coding, and you've put in the URL, if they didn't code the author and the publisher and the container into the coding, it's not going to pop up when you put it in the generator because whoever made the website didn't put it into the coding. So it exists, but the generator can't pick it up because it's not embedded in the URL. All right. So this, if you're using a generator or not, you have to use for every citation. If you're using a generator, double check those citations every time. Okay. Accidental plagiarism is just as bad. But no, okay, I lied. Accidental plagiarism is still bad. Forcefully actually cheating is way worse. Okay. Um, so we want to make sure we're fixing those mistakes. This is why you're going to get feedback on outlines and earlier drafts so I can help you catch these accidents beforehand. And that's again why we're taking these early level courses as well too, so we can help you find and fix these errors so when you get into the big classes in your actual fields, you're not making the big mistakes. So in order of list, the first thing in your citation is your author. Last name, comma, first name. Okay, very first thing. Last name, comma, first name, period. If you have two authors, last name, comma, first name, and first name, last name. So if my husband and I wrote a paper together, I would be listed first because I say so. It would be Looney, comma, Megan, and husband's first name, Looney. Okay, bam, bam. Okay, and then you're gonna put a period at the end. Notice that these punctuations change as we go down too, so pay attention to your punctuations. The second thing after your author is the title of the source. Okay, source and container are different. So let me explain. The easiest way is to know if you're doing like a book. So the title of this book is the short novel. Within this book, there is a chapter or a section called Ethan Frome. Okay, if I'm quoting only from the chapter or the section about Ethan Frome, the title of my source is Ethan Frome. I'm not citing the whole dang book. I'm citing the one section. So title of source, Ethan Frome. The container is this title, the short novel. Okay. This goes for magazines. So let's pretend this is like Time magazine. Okay. Or you're also going to have journals from like the Journal of Psychology or something like that. So Journal of Psychology. Okay. And then within the journal, you got the individual articles. So this is an article about music and psychology. I don't know. So title of source, music and psychology is what is my title of source. Journal of Psychology is what's containing and holding that source. So what is the source and what's containing or holding the source? Okay. So this goes for anything that has the smaller things within it. So chapters within books, articles within larger journals, articles within larger magazines. Okay. Or even TV episode would be the source. Container is the title of the TV show. So what did I want? Supernatural. The title of the episode is the source. Supernatural is the container within there. Some sources, so if you're using a documentary, you're going to go straight to container because a movie, doesn't have two separate titles. So we're going to skip and go author and then the big container, which is the title of the movie. Okay. Same thing if you're going to use an entire book. So let's say you do use this whole book. You're using a couple different things from throughout the book. You're not just using one chapter. You're using chapters 3, 7, 10, and 12. You're using a bunch. So we're going to cite the whole book, not just the chapters. So I'm going to put author, which is Jerome Beatty. Okay, so I'm going to put Beatty, comma, Jerome, period. And then I'm going to skip source because I'm not using an individual chapter. And then I'm going to put the short novel because I'm going to skip straight to it. I'm using the whole thing. And again, just like the rule we said at the beginning of this, if it's a tiny thing, so if it's a tiny source, like the chapter name, we support it with quotes. If it's a big thing, we give it those italics. Okay. Other contributors, this isn't super common. Okay. Oh, going back, ending the title of source, end with a period, title of container, we've switched it up. We're at commas now. Okay. I don't know why, but we're going to commas now. So we end our title of container with a comma. Now, other contributors. This is really common if your source has been translated. I found this a lot when I was doing my own research. So if the source was originally from Spain and they had to translate it into English so I could read it, another contributor is going to be the translator. Or if they had a special someone come in and help with their research, but the special someone didn't really do tons and tons of writing, but they still want to give credit for it, other contributor. Or if they have a special guest on the TV episode, other contributor within there. Your source will list another contributor if it's important enough. Okay, so just make sure you're checking out for those. Version and number, that's volume and issue. You're really only going to come in contact with these if you're looking at magazines and journals. Okay, so when we're doing our online research on the libraries, if any of you use InfoHio at your high schools, InfoHio is a big database. It's just free. Um, those big journals, they have volume and issue. If you have, I don't have one in front of me, sort of anthologies or textbooks, we're going to pretend this is a different textbook. Maybe there's the short novel, the shorter novel, the shortest novel. I don't know. So we have all these different volumes of the novel, and maybe there's multiple issues of it where they've reissued it multiple times. So version is the volume of how many of a different set they have. So are there multiple sets that go with this? And number would be the different issue that it has. This is also common for novels that have been issued multiple times. So if you read Harry Potter, it's been reissued multiple times. Okay, so if your particular issue, maybe it has a slight change to it than the very first issue of Harry Potter, you want to give that number the issue or version of that version of Harry Potter so we know which one you're referencing within there. The next piece is the publisher. So let me turn to the page, you're going to see it. Most of the time in a book, your publisher's listed on like one of the first couple pages, like before you get to the actual content or content page, things like that. Publisher's here. So who put the information out? Who published it? Okay. So for this one, it's Norton and Company. They published it. Penguin Random Books. They published it. For a lot of websites, they're self-published. So the University of Toledo Hospital's website, the University of Toledo published it. So you might repeat. So especially if you're author. So if we're going on the University of Toledo website, I use it. They have a lot of medical things on their website, so I'm going back to it. If they're the author, they might also be the publisher. It's also really common for government documents. For a lot of your papers, I kind of assume I'm going to be sending you to like the Ohio Department of Education or the Department of Health or something like that to find resources. Sometimes they'll have individual authors. Sometimes they're just going to put ODH, Ohio Department of Health. That's our author. So it's our author, but oh no, it's also our publisher because they wrote it and they published it. So you have to put both. So make sure you're looking. If you're like, I have no clue, Looney, I can't find the author, I can't find the publisher, I'm going to bet it has the same too. All right. Publication date, put the date it came out. So I just want the year is all I want. This is a professor ask. In true MLA fashion, you're putting just the year, and that's all I want. I do not care about the individual day it was published. Some instructors do. So make sure you're asking instructor preference, but you're putting the year it came out. Location's a little odd. So location, if it is something physical and it has page numbers, you're putting the page number. So if I'm just quoting that Ethan Frome section chapter, it's 332 through 382. Excuse me. So in location, after I put comma after date, I'm going to put PG, the numbers I just said, 32 through 68, whatever that was. If it's a website, your location is the URL, the link that's up top. So you got to give me the URL. If it's a journal article and you're getting it off of a database, it might be the DOI or the permalink. And when we go over the video on how to do your research, I'll show you how to find those. DOI is just a fancy word for a database link. That if I go on the InfoOhio database or the Marion Tech database, this DOI matches these texts on no matter what database I'm going to. Okay. So it's just saying where this piece was. So it's the link, the page number, or the DOI when it comes to. You're going to have one of the three within there. And then you end the whole thing with a period. Okay. The next piece for this, a works cited has to have a hanging indent. Okay. So when you're typing your works cited, very last page, you've typed all the other papery part, or actually you should probably type your works cited first. But you have the very last page, works cited, you've typed all the citations. Okay. You've done this whole fill in the blank thing. You're proud, it's perfect, you have all your information, and it's listed in alphabetical order. And you by whatever's listed first. So if it has no author, you just whatever's listed first. Okay. So you've listed them in alphabetical order. They're all beautiful and perfect. Okay. Now you've got to do a hanging indent, right? So that is where you are going to go into a Google Doc or a Word doc, and you're going to highlight all your citations. Then you're going to go to indent formatting in your Google Docs or your Word docs. And if you have trouble finding this as you're working, just let me know. I'll walk you through. And then you're going to go to paragraph indenting or paragraph style. It's a little different if you're on Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So I'll ask you which one you're using when you ask me the questions. And then you're going to go to special indentation options, choose hanging, click, and go. Okay, and then it'll indent for you. If you there's a harder way to do it. It's a pain in the butt. I think the easiest way is to highlight them and tell your document to do the special indent for you. Okay. All that means, let me find a pen. Okay. When you have your citations, we're going to, this line is like the left side of the paper. Okay. You've typed the whole thing. The hanging indent means the top half, over here, the top half of your citation hangs over the bottom half. So you know how we indent our paragraphs, just the very first line? Hanging indent is the opposite. We indent everything except the first line. The reason we do this, because if this is one citation, the very first thing you listed, that should be what's in the works cited. So when I'm scrolling my finger down your paper, first thing in your in-text citation, that should be in your in-text citation, this should be in your in-text citation, and I can match back and forth to figure out where it goes. Okay? So clicky here, please. So if you go through these slides, this just goes through exactly what I just explained. This is what the author is. Here's some examples. This is what the title of the source is. Here's some examples. Container. These are, this is a really nice slide too that I would put in your cheat sheet. A lot of the time people go, well, I found it on Google, so Google's the container. Okay, it's not. Google is not a publisher. Google is a database. Google helps you find things that were published, but it's not a publisher. It's a database that holds onto this data and then points you in the direction to find that data. Okay. So Blackboard is just another version of like Canvas or Schoology or Moodle or Pilot. That's all Blackboard is. So if you're wanting to quote one of the sources or something I said in a lecture, okay, and you want to include that in your paper, Canvas is indeed your container, okay? Because I said it and then I published it through Canvas. But I might take you, so the link that takes you to Purdue OWL, okay, Canvas didn't publish it, Purdue OWL published it. So make sure you're using the correct container based on where you found it. Again, Amazon, you got an ebook from Amazon, that's great. Amazon didn't publish it, okay? They just let you purchase it. But if you want to give a customer review in your paper, then yeah, Amazon's the publisher because it was published on the Amazon website. So go back. This is a great way to figure out if it's your container or not. Most of the time, things like Google, they're not your container. You got to go to the source itself. Example of contributors to help you out. Examples of versions and numbers and publishers. Publication dates and location, blah, blah, blah. So overall, we'll go here. Those slides prior to kind of help you understand what are all those sections that I went through and explained. So that little cheat sheet is perfect when you're doing your works cited and filling it out. Go back to this real quick. But remember, so again, if I don't have an author though, I just skip it and go to the next. I skip it and go to the next. If I don't have a version and number, so if I'm using a website, websites don't have versions and numbers. So I'm going to go from, and it probably doesn't have a contributor either. So I'm going to skip from container and go all the way to publisher. I'm not going to put all this mumbo jumbo because it's not included. Like the source doesn't have it. Okay. So if the source doesn't have it, skip, go to the next. Skip, go to the next. Okay. So make sure you're looking over all of the MLA and all of the APA sources, not just my video and not just the slides. Because while I tried to explain in depth, there's always a good chance I forgot something. You never know. Or maybe you're going to understand it better when you read it than when you're being talked at. So before you take the APA and MLA quiz, go through all the sources and be making a cheat sheet that you can have with you at all times. Maybe buy a piece of candy for a teacher at your school and get them to laminate it for you. Okay. Or just have it favorited on your Chromebook or your laptop or whatever you're using within there. And if you have any questions, please email me. Okay. I will be here to answer them all. We don't meet regularly, so email is how you're going to talk and ask me questions, and I want you to get familiar with doing so. Okay, I'm never going to get mad if you email me a bunch and ask me tons of questions. I want you to ask me questions. Okay, so make sure you're taking your notes well, and have a wonderful day.